Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes of your day here at the 6th Floor Museum. I'm Stephen Fagin, the curator, and these monthly living history conversations that we have at the museum are an extension of our oral history project, which has captured more than 2,600 interviews with people from around the world, recalling the moment and the memory of the Kennedy assassination. And this year, to complement our special exhibit, Colorful Memories, we are featuring childhood recollections of Dallas and President Kennedy and the assassination. And you're in for a real treat today because we have a terrific storyteller, a good friend of this museum, Paul Amundsen. He's an entertainment writer and an educator and a native Dallasite. And the thing I have noticed about Dallasites over the years, typically they have not one or two connections to the Kennedy story, but a whole potpourri of experiences. And that's definitely the case for Paul. We're going to be covering a lot of ground across several years in our conversation today. Please join me in welcoming Paul Amundsen to share his story.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate your coming.
Paul, we've got a picture of you up on the screen, age 7, taken just, I believe, a couple weeks after the assassination.
December 10th, 1963.
Yes, and developed, as you can see, in February of '64. We didn't have instantaneous photography on our phones like we do today. Paul, you know, a lot of us, when it comes to our childhood, we think about it occasionally or sometimes not at all. But for you, this period of time, before, during, and immediately after the assassination, has really been the foundation of your life's work. You have spent decades studying this period and talking to people about this period for a book project. Tell us a little bit about that and how it got started.
Well, the name of the book is called The Knoll, One American Family in 1963 Dallas. A boy's view of the end of an era. And the knoll has two meanings, obviously grassy knoll, but if I could just say up front that the knoll also has a second meaning in that 3 weeks before the Kennedy assassination, I had an experience in which God spoke to me. And there's a long story about it, but to make it short, that's where the title comes from. And I did not write this book just because it's fun. It is fun, but it's because the Lord told me to do it, that he wanted me to write a book in my 50s about that experience. And there's a before and after. Kennedy assassination was the end of the 50s. There was a feeling that I've told Stephen, I called it the honey feeling when I was little, is I would imagine a jar of Burleson honey pouring down. I just felt like everything was so magic. It was not just a more innocent time, obviously, but it was just, there was something about it that was electrical. Everybody felt safe. Everybody was on each other's side. There was a glow. It was not just lost innocence, but there was a magic that is really impossible to describe. Today, even people that are baby boomers, I think some of them have forgotten it, just how different it was, but it was a demarcation.
Absolutely. Okay. So, you know, for you, like so many of your generation, the assassination was this defining moment, and there was the before, and there was the after, where everything had changed. And you being age 7 at that time were particularly aware of that. Now, Paul, this book is not just your personal experiences. You have gathered the recollections of others. How many people have you interviewed for this book?
I can't say for sure. I think I said 500. That might be an exaggeration, but there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
You tracked down virtually all of your classmates, teachers, school administrators. I mean, this extraordinary tableau of people who not only shared your universe, but also beyond that, you've talked to assassination people, eyewitnesses, and a number of kind of pop culture figures of the 60s. People like Annette Funicello and Lana Turner, and just an extraordinary array of personalities. It's just a remarkable glimpse into that era through one boy's very nuanced perspective. And that boy, as you can see here, was in the 2nd grade. You were at St. Mark's School, a private school here in Dallas that's been around since the early 1900s. On November 22nd, 1963, what was the mood like at your school?
So that morning, I was in my second grade classroom, and this class I was in, the camaraderie was like it was almost like a microcosm of America. I don't remember any tension, any conflict. Everybody just respected each other, and I've never seen a group like that. Well, so we were in class, and I was leaning back. The sun was blasting through the window. And the night before, Whit's mother called.
A friend of yours who's in the audience.
A friend of ours who's right here. She called my mom and dad and said that we're going to take Whit to see the motorcade, and can Bobby come along? This is Chloe Gersh at St. Mark's, the lower school principal. She was not allowing the boys to go see the motorcade. And so Dad called Mrs. Gersh. He said, could you make an exception for Bobby and Whit to go see that? And she said, yes, I'll give them permission. They had to have a note.
Yeah, so the mood at the school, I understand, like, basically the entire 5th grade got to go out to see the president at Love Field that day.
That's right.
But the lower kids, including yourself in the second grade, and that's you directly beneath the teacher there looking very, very serious, you weren't allowed to leave. But there was an air of excitement that day, right? The president was coming to town.
Right. Okay. That morning, we were at the breakfast table. I said, Daddy, can I go see the motorcade? And Dad said, no, but we're going to let Bobby, but we're not going to let you. And I said, I started crying, and I said, I made a big scene about it and was whining. And Dad said something really sharp to me. I don't remember what it was, but he said, no more belly aching about it. You're not going. And I tore away from the breakfast table in tears and went back to my bedroom. And I remember looking out the window, and it was still overcast. When at St. Mark's, the mood was electric. And Bobby, my older brother, had told me that they were going to go to Love Field to see the president. So I was having these reveries, and I was just daydreaming, Stephen. I was just like, oh, wow, what are they? I bet they're at Love Field right now. And
we've got a picture of your family up on the screen, your mom, Jane, and we can see your older brother, Bobby. Both of them got to see the parade. Tell me, let's talk about their experiences real quickly. Tell me a little bit about your mom's experience seeing the motorcade that day.
She had been just gotten back from the beauty parlor in Preston Royal, and she went to see it over in Turtle Creek, which is typical of her because she was sort of the essence of class, and kind of like she appreciated kind of like Monet paintings, and I can just see her there. And she was standing there, and she was about the only person there, and it was just her and the president, and she was going, "Hi, Mr. President. Hello, Mrs. Kennedy." And ironically, Carl, a friend of mine, happened to be over across the street. We had a housekeeper by the name of Willie Dennis, who was a good friend. I mean, she was like a second mother to me. And I interviewed her after my mother passed away, and she said that the day of the assassination that she had heard Mom's 1963 Galaxy charge into our porte cochere. It was like a gravel driveway. It just like unbelievable. Mom was going so fast, screaming on the brakes, and she'd never done that before. And she came in and she said she was crying, and she said, "Oh, Willie, did you hear the president has been shot?" And Willie said, "Yes, ma'am." And I asked Willie what happened after that. And she said, "Your mom went back to her bedroom and went to her bed, was crying for 30 minutes. And then she, excuse me. And so anyway, after that, she said, "Willie, why don't you go on home and let's just call it a day." And I could just imagine she was our den mother that day. That picture was taken, and I could just picture that her den mother uniform being ironed right in the room while she's crying.
Yeah. Yeah, powerful memories. Anybody that lived through that experience, especially those who got to see the parade that day.
Right.
Your older brother, Bobby, also got to see the parade. He went down with the Moses family, and Whit Moses is here. And there's a home movie that the Moses family captured of the motorcade. And thanks to Paul here, who connected us with Whit Moses, Whit donated that film to the museum. We haven't shared this before. Would you guys like to see it?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So it's very short. It only runs about 30 seconds total, so I'm going to tell you in advance what we're going to see because it goes by very rapidly. There's a nice steady shot of Air Force One overhead coming into Dallas. Then it cuts to a couple close-ups of Mrs. Moses, who was across the street on Cedar Springs, and then a very brief glimpse of the Kennedy motorcade kind of going by at a clip. And then we see right across the street from where the Moses family was, the Democratic Party headquarters on Cedar Springs. So all of this is going to play out in about 25 seconds. So there's a nice steady shot of Air Force One coming into Dallas that day. Wow. Mrs. Moses?
She. Worried. This PPA. And
then there's the Democratic Party headquarters. I've never seen any footage of that building on the day of the assassination. Whit, thank you so much for giving us this home movie for our collection.
My dad.
Your dad, who is Hobart.
He lived behind that movie, that camera.
Yeah, well, we are so honored to have it and honored to share it with you guys. Nobody outside the family, really, family and friends, has seen that film, so we're glad that you guys could be here and see that today. And Paul, thank you, because if it wasn't for you connecting us, we never would have seen or received that film. Paul, you had your own experience that day, and one of the things I've always liked about you is the way you kind of view life through the prism of pop culture.
Yeah.
And you started thinking about TV shows and things like that. Just briefly, take us back to that second grade classroom when you heard the news that President Kennedy had been shot.
I was daydreaming right before, right after chapel. I was nervous about the motorcade because the sun still had not come out, and I was looking out the window of our old lower school building, and I saw third grader Barney Schlinger just going across the courtyard like this, and I went out by the Lawler's lunchroom, and I saw, oh God, the sun's not going to come out. And anyway, that morning I was daydreaming about Bobby and Whit and his friends being at Love Field, because they were originally going to go to Love Field. And I was imagining, there's a long story on that. But anyway, I was thinking about that. At about 12:40, Joe Miskey, who's the maintenance man, came in and talked to Mrs. Vanshaw, who's our teacher, who I've interviewed. And he whispered to her, and her face just turned white. And she said, "Boys, I have something to tell you." And she said, "The president has been shot, but we don't know if he's still alive or not." And so they were fiddling in the hallway with the first grade teacher, and they couldn't get it. They were trying to get KLIF radio, and I don't know why. They just seemed to like, what? And I'm like, just get it on the station. And so the Leave It to Beaver ties in greatly with my book, which is another story. But I've interviewed the whole cast, and I had been right after it had just gone off the air, but it was playing in afternoon reruns in the fall of '63, and I was watching it every day. And right after Mr. Miskey came in and said that, I just all of a sudden just thought, Leave It to Beaver just died. And I looked up over above the green chalkboard, and I was imagining it was like a film clip with splices, but it was a little cockeyed. It was like it was being projected. And I just saw Ward Cleaver, Chief Beaumont, just going, "Well, boys, I think you're just a little too old to be playing ridiculous jokes on the telephone." And then it would rerun back to the same clip, just like, "Well, boys, I think you're too old to be doing ridiculous jokes on the telephone." And it just kept repeating, and I went, Ward never knew about the Kennedy assassination. Everything's different now. He's stuck in that time warp of pre-Kennedy assassination. And so
it's amazing at age 7 that you recognized this shift that occurred right there in your classroom, hearing the news. That really is interesting. The rest of that day, do you remember going home and watching TV with your family?
Yeah. Mom picked me up, and we had can I talk about the Red Rover?
Yeah, well, you did not know that President Kennedy had died.
No, the whole afternoon, we were told he was probably going to be okay. And we had a gym PE class, and Mr. Byrne had us go out. We played Red Rover, and some football and soccer. And Mom picked me up, but the feeling was he was still alive. And Mom picked me up at the front entrance of the school. And I didn't say anything about the assassination because I was hoping for the best. And we got to Royal and Hillcrest. And I said, well, Mom, did you hear? I hear President Kennedy's going to be okay. And she had her arm loped over the steering wheel. And she said, no, he died. And I said, no, Mrs. Vanshaw said he's going to be okay. And she said, no, this was her word. She went, no, he died. I said, are you sure? Yes. Are you sure? And then she said the word, yeah, was staring straight ahead. And I looked over at Mike McCool's house, who was diagonal. He was a kind of a political figure. And I could feel these globs of tears just coming down my eyes, just like a fountain. And so anyway, there's more to that, but I went home and was watching the coverage, and by an hour, I had the whole lexicon down: assassination, sniper's nest, Texas School Book Depository, Lee Harvey Oswald. But the thing is, they kept repeating it over and over, and it was just the same film clips, and they just weren't getting any new news, and it was actually getting kind of morbid and monotonous, and so I turned it off. I didn't want to see it. And that night, Bobby had been at Whit's house, and he came home. Bobby came home at 6 o'clock, and all of a sudden the mood just kind of changed, and it was, I could feel the Lord just strengthening me and strengthening our family. And Bobby was so excited, and he said, yeah, we went to the so we saw the Trade Mart today. And we opened up the paper, and it showed that picture of the Dallas Trade Mart. Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy. And he was so excited, and he said, and we were on Cedar Springs. And I said, Cedar Springs, S-E-E-D-E-R. I go, what's Cedar Springs? He said, it's a street. And he said, yeah, we saw the motorcade, but here, and he was all pumped up because something bad he had gotten with Whit, and they got their second wind and were feeling better. And so he told me that we had the radio on KLIF, and it said, this voice of God, Gordon McClendon, was like going, yeah, and there's, he said he's going to shoot a president. No, he's going to shoot a policeman or something. And they said the people outside the Texas Theater were saying, shoot the son of a bitch. And they said that on KLIF, and I said, what is son of a bitch? What does that mean, Bobby? And he said, well, it's just like the son of a dog. And it went like, oh, you mean like Prince, who was actually the son of Lassie? We won him in a contest.
You were hearing all kinds of new words that day, I imagine. But it's interesting that you bring up Grassy Knoll, Texas School Book Depository. Yes. These words that are so familiar to us today, they were all new on November 22nd.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting that your teacher didn't share the news. She obviously knew and sent you guys home so your parents could break the news about the assassination.
She was told to do that.
That's very interesting. We have a picture of our building here. You actually drove by the School Book Depository in Dealey Plaza the morning after the assassination, and saw the site. This happened in your hometown, and there are so many different connections to this story, and a lot of your connections, Paul, actually have to do with your father. He owned a restaurant chain, Fred's Barbecue, here in Dallas. I think there were about 6 locations around the time of the assassination. We see your dad in the center of this picture right there. Paul, tell me about Lee Harvey Oswald, because as I understand it, according to the story you have shared with me, Lee Harvey Oswald went to Fred's Barbecue, and there's a story there.
The Wynwood Fred's Barbecue in Oak Cliff, the manager was named Guy Money, and there was a contact I made of a gentleman who had lived in the boarding house with Oswald in 1963, and because Lee couldn't drive, he would ask him to drive him to Fred's Barbecue in Wynwood, and so to make a long story short, when Lee would come in there, and I interviewed Mr. Money, the manager, and he would say, "Hey, Lee, how are the girls?" And he'd go, "Oh, fine, Mr. Money." And, you know, Mr. Money is a big, outrageous character, very flamboyant and funny. And he was, the guy's name was Bobby Birdwell, who lived in the boarding house, who I interviewed. And he Lee would ask him to drive him to the Fred's place, is what he called it, the Fred's place. And that they, after the assassination, a week after, Bobby went into Fred's, and everybody was giving him funny looks. But I was going to mention, Mr. Money said whenever Lee came in, that he liked the Polish sausage, you know, being from Russia. And we had ordered Rudolph's sausage, anyway, does that pretty much?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Oswald went to your dad's barbecue establishment
Fred's place.
At least a couple of times,
Yeah.
it sounds like.
Yeah.
Your dad also had this kind of tangential connection to Jack Ruby. Interesting. This is what I talk about. Native Dallasites have this potpourri of connections and experiences. The movie State Fair, which was filmed in Dallas in 1961, was filmed over at Fair Park. Your dad catered the production of that film, and you interviewed several of the cast members, including Pamela Tiffin, who we are seeing in this picture here. Paul, tell us about the story Pam Tiffin told you about Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby.
Aha! They called her the beauty that stole the hearts of two continents in the State Fair trailer. Let's see. I said, well, I had interviewed her, and she was really in simpatico on all of this. She knew exactly what I was talking about. And I said, well, is there anything else you remember about State Fair? And she said, I certainly do, which will be very good for your book. And she said that when they would film on the Midway with the carousel, there was a song, Little Things in Texas, that Jack Ruby would come up and ask that he was a hanger-on. You know how he wanted to get in with the big guys all the time? And so he was going to these movie stars, Pat Boone, Alice Faye, Pamela Tiffin, Bobby Darin, and Margaret, and saying, will you come to my club after shooting? And, you know, he was trying to get in with them. And they were just saying, no way. I mean, you know, we don't even know who you are. I mean, as if Pat Boone is going to go to the Carousel Club and watch Jada, you know? And it was just so weird. She said on the day of the assassination, she saw the mugshot of Ruby, and she went, oh my God, that's the guy from when we did State Fair. I remember the potbelly. I remember he looked like a loser, or somebody who had no light in just darkness in his life. And she said, didn't any Pat or anybody else mention that to you? And I said, no. And she went, isn't that interesting? But they didn't mention that.
Wow. Now, your older brother and his friends actually had a little run-in with Ruby. Just very quickly tell that story, because it's indicative of kind of the time period and how young people were behaving in those days.
In October 1963, Bobby, my older brother, Whit, was his best friend. And the clique of the St. Mark's fourth graders, they came over every afternoon. I'd be just at home, and they would tear in the door like a tornado. Just so much noise, so much racket. And they would go out. We actually had a basketball court and in our backyard, and they'd go out and shoot baskets. And I was trying to watch Leave It to Beaver on TV, and they would, every afternoon in October '63, they would storm in just like this tornado. And Whit and Bobby used to say to each other when they were razzing each other, they would say, you squirrel. They had that was one of the things. And I'd hear them back there going, pounce, 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 out on the court, pounce, pounce, oh, you squirrel, pounce, pounce, pounce. This was about 8 guys from Whit's and Bobby's class. And so anyway, one of these days, this was about October 20th, the tornado came over, and after they were playing basketball, they came and went into Bobby's room, and I'm just sitting here watching Leave It to Beaver, and all of a sudden I hear this, whoa!
Yes.
And I was going, what is going on? And they tore out of the out of our guest room and were just laughing their heads off. And I'm like going, what in the world? It ends up that Bobby had gotten a Carousel Club business card that Whit and the guys, they went downtown to go to Magic Land and Record Grill and the Greyhound station just to mess around. And they apparently had stopped right by the Carousel Club, and Ruby was handing out things. And it shows the stripper on it and everything. And anyway, back in those days, young people were really considered citizens. You know, that it was naughty to go outside the Carousel Club, but I mean, you know, they were treated respectfully. Just here, boys. And so anyway, Bobby showed me the card, and it was in our desk, his desk drawer, until the day we moved from the house in 1970. And this memory had been kind of long gone, but when I saw a picture of it, I went, oh yeah, because it was recessed. It had some, like a guitar thing. I used to strum it like a guitar. The business card had things that, Don, you would know about this. What do you call it? Like
we actually have a picture we can share of this risque business card from 1963. There it is. I should have offered a parental advisory. I apologize, but that little sketch of the dancer there, girls, 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 that was considered pretty risque among young boys, I guess, back at the time of the assassination.
See, I would strum it like a guitar.
Now, Paul, before we wrap this up and let these folks get back to the museum, there's one other aspect of this story, kind of surprisingly, that jumps ahead. You were in the Oliver Stone movie JFK in 1991. You had a couple of bit parts of playing, I believe, a government agent and a reporter.
Yeah.
And while you were there on the set of JFK, you kind of became friendly with a particular actor. Briefly tell us a little bit about that.
If it's one thing I can't stand, it's people that try to kiss up to movie stars and bother them. Like, can I have my picture taken with you? And I try not to do that. And Kevin Costner was out there one day, and John Candy was out there, and everybody was going, oh, can I get my picture taken? I said, I'm not going to do that. But one day, it was really hot, and I was on this for 8 weeks, and I looked up in front of the depository here and saw this guy wearing a raggedy white T-shirt and a stubble, and I went, I got these chills through my whole body. I went, oh my God. That's the guy that played Oswald. And nobody knew who he was. Nobody said a word to him. I went over and I very assertively, I'm Paul Amundsen. And he said, I'm Gary Oldman. And I said, Gary, you're perfect. You're perfect. And he said, he was very nervous. It was his second movie. And he said, I hope I do okay. And I said, Gary, you're going to get the Academy Award. I said, when I saw that, I just had goosebumps. And he was really nervous. And one day during filming, I had to smoke like 3 packs of Winstons while I was a cameraman on the I'm Just a Patsy scene. And I was in there, he was there, and there were a whole bunch of extras there playing reporters. And so Oliver Stone was over here in a little kind of behind a curtain, and they were getting ready to shoot the scene. And I was just kind of just in my daydreams, I was just drinking all this in. And there was this long silence, and I heard this, how am I doing, Paul? What? What? And it was Gary. He's over there about to be filmed. He said, how am I doing? And I said, and so I thought you would enjoy that story.
Yeah, that was a great story. Before he was Sirius Black and Commissioner Gordon, he was Lee Harvey Oswald in Oliver Stone's film JFK. And Paul, he did get that Academy Award, just not for JFK. He had to wait, I think, till about 2017 when he portrayed Winston Churchill. But that's right. What a remarkable array of experiences. Paul did his first oral history with the museum more than 25 years ago. And you know, oral history is so important to preserving memories of this time period. We're talking about events that were more than 61 years ago. If any of you guys have memories, childhood recollections of Kennedy and the assassination, and you would like to be part of our oral history project and do an interview on Zoom after you go home, please reach out to us, oralhistory@jfk.org. We'd be happy to add your voice to this tapestry of living memory. Paul, thank you so much. I know you were a little nervous about doing this today, but I appreciate you being here and sharing your story.
All these kind people that came and actually paid money. I feel very indebted to you.